Let's go. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 chapters of Rambam. Hilchos, Maas, Resheni, V'Netaravoy, Prakim, Ches, Tes, and Yud, chapters 8, 9, and 10, beginning with Perek Ches. Perek Ches is going to begin dealing with the following. When you have money of Maas Resheni, and you buy an entire animal, which also has hide, or you buy a cask of wine, you're buying a food item, but there is something there that's not a food item. What will the status of the hide be? What will the status of the cask be? As we just learned towards the end of yesterday's last chapter in Perek Zayin, Halacha Yud Zayin, that Rambam wrote like this, that if I take money of my Sheni and if I use it to buy something that's not a food item, first what has to happen is that money, even though I already spent it, but I spent it for something that it should not have been spent for, I have to take that amount of money, not my Sheni money, and use that in Yerushalayim to buy food. Or using the words of the Rambam, that oichel keneged oisam hamois bi Yerushalayim. That will be the question over here. Do I have to take the money that was used for the hide of the animal or for the cask of the wine, cheshbon, how much value does it have? How much money did I spend? Do I have to use that money, keneged bi Yerushalayim, or do I not need to do so? And we will also be learning another very interesting halacha. Whenever a transaction happens, it's good to remember what part of the transaction is actually the most crucial part. That means if something belongs to you, when will it belong to me? And there are 2 options, either when money is given or when the buyer is taking the item physically, doing Meshicha. We paskin that Meshicha, taking the item, is kind of. However, we're going to see that by Ma'aser Sheni, it's not exactly that way. And the big difference will be, who cares at what point did the transaction actually happen? I'll tell you who cares. What were to happen if after money was given to buy product, what happens if there was a fluctuation of the price of that product? As we're going to speak out details, whether it went up, whether it went down. And again, since it's not only the Meshicha, but as we will see, there is a part of what needs to happen by Ma'aser Sheni, which only happens when the money exchanged hands. That will affect substantially this topic, as we'll go into great details of a fluctuation in price. Perek Ches has 15 halachas. This is actually the final chapter that's going to deal with Ma'aser Sheni, because today's other 2 chapters, Perek Tes and Perek Yud, will be speaking about Netar Avoy. Always, as we come to the end of a series, we go into very minute details. So let's start. Halacha Aleph. Halikeach behema l'zivchei shlamim. If a person uses the money as they should, now we said that midrabanan they have to buy, if they're buying a domesticated animal, it must be bought for a carbon, which the person did. Or if a person is using the money of Ma'aser Sheni to buy a non-domesticated animal, obviously not for a carbon, which is okay because you're buying a food item. So listen to this, guys. If you are buying it from a person who's not a merchant, which means the person is not that makpid regarding the hide, so then the din is yatsa ha'oid l'chulin. Let's say we know that the hide, let's say I spent $1,000 for the animal. Had I bought it from a merchant, the merchant knows that really from the $1,000, let's just give numbers, 900 is for the meat for the animal, but there's the final $100 is for the hide, which has value. If that would be the case, that would mean that I spent $100 for the hide. Hide of an animal is not food. We learned, Perek Zayin, Halacha Yud Zayin, that whenever I use Ma'aser Sheni money for non-food, I have to be oichel keneged oisam hamois bi Yerushalayim. I would then have to go out of pocket, spend another $100 for food items, to rectify the fact that I spent money for a non-food item. Here, there is an advantage of buying something from a non-tagar, from a person who's not such a great merchant. They're not nedagdik. In other words, listen, I'm paying the same $1,000. But in this person's mind, the way he views it, he's charging for the animal. The fact that the buyer also gets hide, gesundheit. He doesn't view it as some of the money for the meat, some of the money for the hide. All of the money went for the meat, which is great. which also means that none of the Meiser Sheni money was given for the hide, and therefore Yotza Ha'oy L'chulin, because it's not in exchange of Meiser Sheni money. None of the Kedushas, how money went into the hide. And that's true, not only in the example that I gave, but really, if be'emes, the meat is worth $400, the hide is worth $600. Don't forget, this not merchant is not a shlamazel. He's getting the $1,000, but he doesn't know about these details. He knows that for an animal you charge $1,000, and in his mind it's all for the meat. That's the word. But if you buy the animal from a merchant who understands exactly what is being given for what, then lo yotza ha'or l'chulin. And the bottom line will be is that not only is the hide holy, imbued with kedushas ma'aser sheni, and as we'll see soon, that means you have to bury it. It's more than that. Is that the number that is actually given for the hide? That money was not well spent. Hide is not food. The person will have to spend that equivalent amount of money out of pocket for food in Yerushalayim. And the same will be same will be with a sealed jug or cask of wine. In places, this will be key, where it was common for people to sell them sealed. So again, how do we view that sale? There are two ways. Guys, a cask has value. Let me just go to my numbers generally. I spent $1,000. If the guy would have been a merchant, he really would have known that the reason why this is sold for $1,000, it's $900 for the wine and $100 for the cask. If that would have been in the mind of the seller, even though the buyer doesn't know, that the poil would mean that the $100 was spent for a cask. You're not allowed to do that. Well, on one hand, the cask now is Meiser Sheni. On the other hand, I have to spend another $100 out of pocket in Yerushalayim for food. But if I buy it from a non-tagar, from a non-merchant, he doesn't care about these details. He was told, you have this merchandise, sell each one for $1,000. In his mind, he's selling wine for $1,000. Which number one is great. There's no kedushas ma'aser sheni. I can use the cask for whatever I want later. I don't have to bury it. I don't have to destroy it. And I don't have to spend additional money connecting to Yerushalayim. Now, lefikach tzarech hamoicher leftoyach rosh yakadem kedei shelo yetze hakankan l'chulin. In other words, what the lefikach means that we want for more money to be spent from Meiser Sheni on food item proper. So if someone wants for that to happen, open up the barrel. The moment the barrel is open, then we don't say, even by a non-merchant, that he views the kankan bottle to the wine, doesn't view it that way. And therefore, all of the money, you're not buying the barrel, you're only buying the wine. He's going to end up forcing the person to spend more Meiser Sheni money on wine. And you're not going to lose $100, if that will be my numbers, won't be lost on a barrel. Now, the
jug, what does that do?
Just explained it. No, so then the jug is not bought with the money. If the jug was bought with the money, then the jug has to be buried, and I have to spend the equivalent amount of money of the jug again, michulin, on food in Yerushalayim. Then yotza kankan l'chulin. In other words, here we're saying that if the guy is very specific in saying how much money per liter of wine, if they specify that during the sale, that's also going to be great. Then it's going to be very clear that none of the money was spent for the cask. When do we say some of the money is spent for the cask? If not, none of that was specified. Like I mentioned, you're buying it from a merchant. The merchant understands that some of the money being given is for the barrel, but he doesn't mention anything. If you bought wine from a jug that's open, and in that case, we say all of your money that's being spent is only going for the wine, or even if you are buying a sealed cask, but if it's in a place, in that case, since we never say that the barrel was included in the number that you gave. In all of these cases, if he gave you the barrel for the number, for the money that you gave him, so then lo yotza kankan lechulin. And like we mentioned, and therefore, Danny, the ikin will be is that we ask, okay, how much was the barrel? The barrel is $100. All right. That means you misused $100. And now you have to take another $100 of chulin money and buy $100 of peiros in Yerushalayim. That's again Perek Zayin, Alocha Yud Zayin, that ochal oichel keneged ois and amois be Yerushalayim. Lokach salei te'enim banovim imakli. Let's go to other items. I'm buying a basket of figs, a basket of grapes. I'm buying it with their container. Lo yotzu demei hakli l'chulin. In other words, what we say is that vadai, no matter, even if the guy is not a tagar, whatever number he charged for you, when you buy an animal, you're spending a lot of money. So in the mind of a non-merchant, he threw the barrel in for free. It will be great. In his mind, you paid all the money for the product. Here, no one is throwing nothing in for free. As long as the seller understands that some of what you spent was for the basket, which creates this issue. That means you spend some money for a non-food item. Now you have to spend that equivalent amount of money from your pocket in Yerushalayim. Halacha dal. If you buy nuts or shkedim or almonds, here, no matter whom you bought it from, the moicher is never makbet on these shells that have very little value. The moicher never viewed any of your money that you gave was given for the shells, even though people used to make use of them, even if it's only for fuel, which is great. So the shells, number one, are chulin. And number two, you don't have to add now new money out of pocket. Lokach choisel tamarim. Choisel tamarim means that sometimes you buy dates together with their branches. In other words, you did not harvest them off the branch. You just cut the whole branch and sold it. Here also, no one views that branch as to be something of importance. Everyone, the moicher, which is key, understands that the money that he's receiving is only for the dates. So yatsa choisel chulin. Kupa shel tamarim. To buy a container of dates, so im derusais, if they were pressed, yatsa hakupais lechulin. V'meinay derusais, yatsa hakupais lo yatsa hakupais lechulin. And therefore, Danny, number one, that item, right? It's an exchange. Ma'aser sheni money, the kedusha is imbued also in the basket or in the container, and you have to spend equivalent money for food in Yerushalayim. Halacha 5. Bishoylo yayin shel ma'aser sheni. If you have wine of Ma'aser Sheni, and v'hishil kalkanav lo'oisa Ma'aser, and you are so look, let's read whoever's having the chayenu. He writes like this: you stored wine, that's the key here, from which Ma'aser Sheni was not yet separated in jugs. So you have untithed wine. That's the way this is going to make sense, in order for the next halacha not to be problematic. And now what you want is when the wine is in this kankan, prior to it being Ma'aser Sheni, you want to designate one entire kankan with the jug for Ma'aser Sheni. So we can argue, like we began in today's Perek, that when you have a sealed cask of wine, at times we can use the kankan as bottle to the wine that's in it.
Who's letting in? The owner of the Ma'aser Sheni, like he himself? He's just saying, hey, these kind of are... No. So that's what that we just explained from the footnote. I'm lending it to me. I'm lending it to myself. In other words, right. I want to separate the entire barrel with the cask from Ma'aser Sheni. I need to keep it somewhere. It's when I designated it Ma'aser Sheni, the wine was already in the cask. So lo yotzo ha Ma'aser es hakankanim. I obviously I'm not using any of the value of the cask for Ma'aser Sheni. I'm only using the wine for the Ma'aser Sheni. The cask has nothing to do with Ma'aser Sheni. But if kanas hayayin l'toichem stam, in our case,
In other words, in the beginning of Allah, Dani, I have to make it clear that my Sheni has nothing to do with the barrels. Since the wine was in there prior to it being designated, and when I'm separating the mice, I'm saying the wine is my Sheni, not the kankanim. The kankanim have nothing to do with my Sheni. But if I put wine into its stam without making the above stipulation, if prior to sealing the barrel, I verbalize that the wine in there is meiser sheni, then loikana ha-meiser. Then again, the casks are not connected to meiser sheni, but finally the im is shesasam kana shem. Ve'oso meiser, now kana meiser as I can. In other words, here, guys, the cask will be viewed as meiser sheni. All of this is behemshach to what we began in this chapter, that there are times that we view the cask bottled to the wine within it. And l'mayin afkamina, I want to know, guys, whether the barrel has a kedusha of meiser sheni. Here, it's not about spending money, right? If I have the oil of an animal that's meiser sheni, what do you have to do with it? You have to bury it. You can't use it for anything else. Guys, the word chulin dafka doesn't mean what you think. Chulin means tevel. Nothing was separated yet. Now, 1 second. I have one revius of chulin, and then I added more wine. And then I said that the revius of tevel should be meiser sheni, but there was other wine in there as well. Or not wine, which is not so chashiv. Here it makes no difference. We will never say that the barrel is bottled to the contents in it, either because it's not fully meiser sheni, it's a mixture of meiser sheni and something else, or because the contents are simply not as chashiv as wine. So never like kana meiser as lakan kanim, which is advantageous. They are only viewed as a container holding on to meiser sheni. They themselves never became meiser sheni. Halacha vav. You know what? You have a good example. Can I give you a good example, Danny? Pashan, any product, any fruit that grows off the ground, that grows in a klipa, that will be a great example. When I designate my almonds, if they are still in the shells, as meiser sheni, what of it is meiser sheni? You know what? All of it. We don't say, no, the shells are not food. Doesn't matter. Sometimes that the klipa, the holder, is bottled to the contents in it. And if it becomes meiser sheni, then all of the dinim of meiser sheni apply to it. Halacha vav. Tzvi, which is an animal that could be eaten, a deer that was bought because of meiser, meaning because of meiser sheni, and now the tzvi died. So what must happen? You cover ba'iroi. Now, can I exchange food for money? What did we learn yet? For example, if the food becomes tamei, even though it's in Yerushalayim, we learned you can exchange it back for money. No problem. That's because after you make the exchange, when you're played it again, you can then go ahead and eat it. Here, the tzvi died without shchita. It's not royal achila. Meiser sheni is also referred to as holy food. And there's a rule that ein playdim as akachim, only for you to be allowed to feed it to dogs, which will be the only function you can do with this animal. So what must happen? Nothing. The same thing you must do with you bury it. And that includes the hide, like we mentioned. The hide is bottled to the animal. All of it is considered meiser sheni. Bury it. And now ushchatai. And now it becomes tamei. Since if you redeem it, you can eat it. Now you can redeem it. Next, hamaniach dinner shel meiser sheni. Lias oichel kenegdoi ache yetze lechulen. I have a dinner, and I'm making a declaration every time. The dinner is meiser sheni. When I'm buying food, I'm saying the food that I have should be in exchange of the dinner. The only thing is I don't always have food in the value of the dinner with mechoinish that I have to add. I'm eating up some of it. I'm allowed to do it. And I can keep on doing it until I exchanged almost all of the dinner. 1 second. So I made such a statement. So first of all, that was a very common thing. It's amazing. I don't have to go to the market with a dinner. I can buy food and I can tell you, Danny, I'll pay you later. Forget about the how I make up with the seller. Someone can give me a gift. I can say, this food, It's worth a half a dinar. I have a half a dinar of Ma'aser Sheni in my drawer. Okay, the kedusha of that should go into this. And my goal will be is to use up the dinar and then to have a chulin dikadin. Now here, this is what happened now. When I made the first exchange, the value of the dinar fluctuates. At that time, the dinar was worth 20 ma'ah, which is a guzma, because normally we know a dinar is worth 6 ma'ah, which means that this happened at a time, that Rambam's example just is that the dinar was very devalued. Doesn't matter. And when I made my first exchange, I bought the value of half at the time. Achal all of the eser ma'in. You guys halk up, which means that half of the dinar now is not holy, but half of the dinar is holy. But the numbers is 10. 10 is half of 20. And now, prior to me making another exchange, the dinar became even more devalued. Now you need to spend, the opposite. You have to spend more ma'ah to buy a dinner. The dinner became more expensive. So now you have to spend 40 ma'ah. How much is half of 40 ma'ah? 20 ma'ah. So we go at the current value. And only then Yetzel Chulin. And we don't say, what are you talking about? I already spent 20 ma'ah. We don't do that. In other words, the first consumption at that time, if it was then worth half of the dinner was resolved. You want to continuously use the dinner to redeem more? Fine. You want to take the kedusha from the dinner and put it on food? You do it at the value of the time of that redemption. Hukra amois, and the same thing is in the opposite direction. And now the whole dinner is worth 10 ma'ah. You already ate up 10 ma'ah. You can't say, well, now the whole dinner is full, and you don't do that. Now you have to eat another half of its current value, another chamish wine, and only then, in other words, you make that exchange at the current rate. Halacha zayin. Halakeach peiros b'sela shel kesav ma'aser. You're buying this guys in Yerushalayim. Umashach ha'peiros. Now, normally when it comes to buying chulin, what moment affects the transaction? Meshicha. You did not give money yet. You were mashach the peiros. Until the amount of peiros upon which you made meshicha now is worth double. So there's two steps that you have to understand. Number one, when were you kind of the peiros? When you made meshicha. But the gavaldik part of this halacha is that the chilul that's happening over here, which is exactly what you need to happen. No, the money is Ma'aser Sheni, guys. The food is chulin. When you buy food in Yerushalayim, peiros, with ma'os Ma'aser Sheni, what happens is that the kedusha goes from the money onto the peiros. The chilul does not happen. The chilul only happens, guys, when you give the money. So the din is harei ze mafresh aleim sellable vad. Even though the chilul only happens when you give the money, you still only have to give the seller. Which will mean you might have thought that you have to use for this 2 saloim, because since the chilul only happens when money is exchanged, you understand? You're only giving 1 seller. When you don't, the chiddush is that even though the chilul happens when money is given, but you can't retract the sale because as far as the monetary part is concerned, you were kind of the peiros. Peiros is yours. Right now it's worth double. Doesn't matter. Let me ask you a question. If a seller, you have money of Ma'aser Sheni, and the seller wants to give you double the value, nothing wrong with that. If I have a store, I have the right to make a promotion. 2 for 1. Doesn't bother me that the current numbers don't match. The key is that even though, remember this, as far as Kenyan is concerned, Meshicha Koina, chilul of Ma'aser Sheni only happens when the monies are exchanged. In our case, where it's to the advantage of there being more money of Ma'aser Sheni, which means ultimately there'll be another cell on the guy's pocket. More money is going to be spent in Yerushalayim for food. That's the way it works. Halacha ches. Let's go in the opposite direction. You made Meshicha. Again, as far as Kinyan is concerned, Meshicha is kind. When you made Meshicha, the value of your one seller, you made Meshicha currently at the value of 2 seller. You didn't give the money. You took fruit, which right now is worth 2 seller, which means you were kind of the fruit. You owe 2 seller. But now that quantity, which is a larger quantity, the fruits became devalued. Now, if you would make the transaction, you would only have to give a seller. You see, even though you were koinem, but since the chilul only happens when money is exchanged, you only give 1 seller. And therefore, there's going to be more money in your pocket for Ma'aser Sheni. Now, that's not fair. Forget about the chilul part, the exchange. If Meshicha is koina, the vendor will say, no. What you took from me, you were koina it at the value of 2 seller. Yeah, you're right. You have to give the guy 2 seller. But the second seller has to be from chulin money. How great is that? A leniency, at least for you not to fully lose. Okay.
Why when he's on the earth?
No, because you're giving him the my money. Normally the my kesef sheni shel demai, we have an issue with it because we don't want him to become tamid. But we say that by demai you can give it to an amoritz. It's a cooler for you not to lose that money. The point is that when we are looking to make sure that there should be more real Ma'aser Sheni money in Yerushalayim, which will be spent for food. Ma'aser Sheni doesn't lose, like Hegdish doesn't lose. But the seller cannot lose because Mashiach is kind. Now, what happens if the opposite happened? The opposite means no Mashiach was done, only money was given. No, suddenly seller shol Ma'aser, you gave the money. You gave a seller. And now, really, the food became more expensive. If there would be, I want you to know what would be the din by non-Ma'aser Sheni. So, like we're saying, the kinyan is done by Meshicha. However, we're going to learn the sugya again. Once money was exchanged, if any party backs out, there's something called a mishapara. Mishapara is a certain type of curse. That the one who took retribution from the Doir Hamabel, from the Doir Haflaga, they mentioned that will take retribution for people who don't hold up their words. You make a mishapara not when the guy says, I would like to buy, when they gave money, even though he was not claiming. So if you gave the money, now don't forget, guys, that by Ma'aser Sheni, the giving of the money is Mechalal the Kedusha. You understand what's going on over here? I have money of Ma'aser Sheni. When I gave the money, you know what that means? It means that the guy who received the money, the guy who receives the money can do anything he wants with that money. The money is Yoitzel Chulin. The payros that I bought, I just didn't take it yet. That payros, it will be imbued with Kedushas Ma'aser Sheni. So here the din is Masha Pada Pada, because like we're saying that the exchange happened, Masha Pada Pada. Now, can Vadin Beneo? Vadin Beneo means if someone wants to back out, they'll get a Mishapara. They'll get a Mishapara, but the Kedusha part or the Chilul part of the Kedusha of the money going into the food, that happened when you gave the money. And the same thing is Nasan Lishtei Siloim. Huh?
Who does the Mishapara? Is it like a court?
I can't hear you.
Who does the Mishapara? How does that happen?
How did it happen? We're going to learn in Hilchas Kinyanim. It was a curse. It was another medium that motivated people not to do something that's not ethical. There are many halachas in Kinyanim where there is the actual transaction, and then there's, be ethical. Okay, halacha test. Here it was the opposite. You gave 2 saloim of meiser for that amount of food. And now, prior to you making Mashiach on the peiros, if you would have made this transaction right now, you would only have to give 1 selah. Here again, in other words, even though over here Even though over here, we always try to have more money of Ma'aser Sheni, still being holy, needing for it to be used for food. We can't do that because we are consistent. No matter who benefits, the exchange of money affects the chilul, even though the kinyan was not done. So Masha Prada. And both of these saloyim were yoytze l'chulin. Elamau midas adim. Because always, now guys, the nusach here is just a little bit difficult. Just this is a hard pedic. Shemaisa sheni pidiyasai. Let me tell you one gear so that fits better. Pidiyasai hi mechirasai. Which even if the gear is mishichasai, what the Rambam is saying is that the giving of the money of Maisa Sheni is that which affects the chilul like Mashiach affects the king, and that's what it means. And the whole thing works just following the rules as we explained. Halacha Yud. Misha ha'eloi paid his chilul Yerushalayim. And I forgot my Maisa Sheni money at home. I don't care how far I live. I don't need, guys, for the money of Maisa Sheni to be with the food for the chilul to happen. All I need to do is I can make a declaration that the monies that I have in my home, the monies that I have in my bank account, are mechulalim al peiros ha'elo. I have to keep a cheshbon. So if I have an account of Maisa Sheni money and I have over there $100, I buy food out of pocket. But I can always use that food to affect the chilul. Now, once it's you know how effective it is? This fruit now is imbued with Kedushas Maisa Sheni. So therefore, and I affected, and v'yotzu, oitzam ha'ois l'chulam imekayimam. Beautiful. Allah Yud Aleph. Oilem ois Maisa Sheni b'Yerushalayim. The money of Maisa is in Yerushalayim. The opposite, and I have produce. However, I have it outside Yerushalayim. I can also make that statement, the bigger chiddush, even though the fruits are not here. Should be and it's effective. And now this equivalent value of money against the peiros is now chulin. Those peiros are fully Maisa Sheni peiros. And v'yalu ha-peiros v'yochle b'Yerushalayim. Both Yud and Yud Aleph has a bigger chiddush, but it's all based on one rule. During the moment of chilul. You have to own them. Halacha Yud Beis.
Maisa Sheni, once it's in Yerushalayim, you can't take it out. That's only the actual produce, not the money. That's where the money, which is in Yerushalayim, can be redeemed on produce that's outside.
I don't think you need that. You don't need that. You're not taking the money out. The point is that when you make an act of chilul, we always think about it. I'm buying. The act of buying normally happens when the fruit belongs to someone else. Here we're speaking about if it belongs to the same person, a verbal declaration of exchange is good enough, even if it's not there. Halacha Yud Beis. The money is in Yerushalayim. And v'tzarech lohem. I need the money. In other words, guys, the money of Maisa Sheni is very limited money. I can only use it for food. I need it to pay for my hotel. Now, I don't have peiros, but v'yesh lechaveirei peiros chulun shirot shalachlan. Listen to this. I can also make a chilul. I can say, we're going from mikal al. This is gavaldik, and it's effective. The guy who owns the peiros has to acquiesce to that, which is fine. I mean, he's going to eat his peiros in Yerushalayim anyways. The nimtzu oisena peiros are now considered lekuchen the kesef ma'aser. And the yoichal oisim chaveda now is chaver is bound. Yes, the Tara. V'lo yivsid klum. Maisa Sheni didn't lose, and the yetzu hamois lechulin. Bamed dvarim amurim. This is a big leniency that I can be mechalal my ma'ois Maisa Sheni on someone else's peiros. V'shohoya chaveda bala peiros chaver. Because we're not allowed to give Maisa Sheni to a non-chaver. She'ein moisim peiros Sheni shavadei lechaver. And therefore, going back to Rabbi Chaim, same thing, that if I have ma'os of the mai, which they were more lenient by ma'os of the mai, we don't even need that. So it's just an eitz of when Mashiach is coming. It's good to remember this halach. We're going to have a lot of money, Maisa Sheni, which is great for food. Sometimes I don't need to eat. I have other expenses. Right now, there's no credit cards also. What do? Easy. You don't have to have the fruit there. You don't even have to own it as long as your chaver agrees. You have in your house $100 worth of wine. Okay, so let me make a chilul between this and your wine. And if he agrees, I'm a chaya. Then I freed up this $100, and that wine is now Meiser Sheni wine. Umuter lechalas Meiser. Meiser Sheni means both paydas and money of the mai. We're talking about the mai. Al paydas am ha'aretz al ma'osav. Now there's another chiddush here. Forget about the tuma aspect, which we are not concerned if it's only shel the mai. Let me ask you a question. You cannot be machalal the kedusha of Meiser Sheni money on fruit that's already Meiser Sheni, or on fruit that's already hegdish. You can't do that. Can't be played that kodesh on kodesh. Maybe the Amaretz who's telling me, my friend, that he has fruit, maybe his fruit is already Meiser Sheni. That I don't have to be chayish. The Amaretz, I suspect him that he's not separating all the types. I suspect him that he's not keeping everything in the state of tahara. There might be tuma there, but I don't have to be chayish shema shel Meiser Sheni. Because if the Amaretz's fruit is already Meiser Sheni, then my act of exchange is nonsensical, would not work. That I don't have to be concerned about. I can ask him, but I trust him what he tells me. Halacha Yudal. Hamaniach dinar shel Meiser, like we mentioned already in this before, the Esoichel connected v'hoil. But I have a dinar of Meiser Sheni money. It's Meiser Sheni. I'm going to the Shukam of Yerushalayim with chulin money. I'm buying chulin product. But when I have a payda, so I'm saying, oh, this is worth, let's say, a tenth of a dinar. Okay, fine. So the tenth of the kedusha of the dinar should go on this. And every time I'm eating fruit, I'm making a chilul, and I'm going to eat down. I'm going to eat away all of the kedusha of and then I'm going to free up the dinner. So kivin she'achal olav achel anishma menu elapachas mitruta. Then, even though there is still some number there, but it's less than a pruta, automatically the dinner is yatzel l'chul. Another nuance, another detail, in which you don't have to add a chaimish. Aval b'shal badai, we're speaking about the money is mine, the fruit is mine. I have to add a chaimish. Lo yatzel l'chol nat yishar mimenu pachas mishal pruta achar shemisivin as chaimish. You have to take that into account. For example, shenisha mimenu pachas ma'arba chumshe pruta. In other words, if I have left 4/5 of the pruta, since whenever I will make an exchange, I have to add a fifth, so I will be adding a pruta. So I still have to add a pruta. It's only when you have less, not less than a pruta, but less than 4/5 of a pruta. Final halachat as well. Temeim utohoidim, that are eating and drinking together in Yerushalayim. Ve'rotzu hatohoidim liyos oichlin ma'aser sheni shalahem. Manichin sela shel ma'aser sheni. And they make a declaration, Kol shahatohoidim oichlin v'shoisim. Everything that will be eaten here only by the tohoidim is sela zu mechulelas olav. And that's effective, even though some people are eating betuma. Well, their food was not the food used for redemption. However, there's one nuance, that no one can touch the other people's foods. Because once a tahir takes food, that food is going to be part of the exchange. Now it's Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni, you cannot be matame. Or even better, if the exchange happens only when you swallow it, you cannot be poida mois Meiser Sheni on tamedika food. So this was a siyum on the laws of Meiser Sheni. Now we're moving on. Both Parakim Tes and Yud is going to teach us about the din of Neter Avoy. So we're going to have in Pedic Tes the basic rules of Neter Avoy. The basic rule will be is that Neter Avoy is mamish like Meiser Sheni. So whatever we learned in 8 chapters, that Rambam will not even use a half a chapter for, because mamish is just going to show you that all of the prate dinim that we learned in Uchas Meiser will be the same for Neter Avoy. We're going to speak about what were to happen if Neter Avoy happens to be on the Shemitah year. And the ikir will be had a cheshbon for Neter Avoy. And really, that's how do you make the calculation of Orla? Just to remember, guys, we learned not that long ago that Rambam paskins that Orla is noyik bein ba'aretz bein b'chutz la'aretz. But b'chutz la'aretz, Orla is halacha l'moshe b'Sinai. Neter Avoy is not shayach to chutz la'aretz, as we'll see clear. But how do you make the cheshbon? People say, 3 years. 3 years from what? And there's something that the Rambam writes that is very difficult to understand, but it's very clear. Shita Sarambam. Pedic Tes has 13 halachas. Let's begin. Neter Avoy, first of all, has a status of kodesh, like Meiser Sheni, which is kodesh, as it says. Now, where do we have in the Torah the parsha of Neter Avoy? Very little. You have this in Parshas Kedoshim. not in the end of Bechul Koisai together with Ma'aser Sheni, or the other places with Ma'aser Sheni, whether it is in the A or Aser Ta'as. No, it says Ubashana Haravis. Right after the Torah tells us not to eat the arla, it says Ubashana Haravis here Kol Piriyoi Kodesh, which will inspire you to give Hallel to the Eibishter. Kodesh Hilulam Hashem. Now, what does Kodesh mean? V'dinoi lehei achel leba'olav b'Yerushalayim k'maiser sheni, which also means, my friends, that the Rambam writes, he speaks about the Beis HaMikdash, we said that Rambam means the Mizbeach, that maiser sheni is noyik b'zman hazeh. Neter avoy is noyik, but you cannot eat it if there's no Mizbeach. Now, says that Rambam, Uchashem she'ein maiser sheni b'Surya. What did we learn in Perek Aleph? We're going back to the beginning. Halacha Yud Dalid. Since you don't have to bring the product of Surya to Yerushalayim, so the Rambam says we have this system that wherever from where there is no chiyuv of hava'ah, there is no chiyuv of separation. So it goes together. Just like there's no Ma'aser Sheni that needs to be separated from Surya, kach ein neter avoy, even in Surya. Okay, there's no need to say mechutz la'aretz tam. There's no neter avoy. Another thing, by neter avoy, there's also an allusion on Parshas Nasai where it says ve'ish es kedoishav lo yihiyu. So it's a very hidden pasuk. God is telling you that which is holy belongs to you. Well, it's not so simple. Most things that are holy do not belong to you. That pasuk is talking about she'ein l'cha kodesh shaloi nisparish dinei b'Torah lemihu, for the Torah to need to say who it belongs to. So that pasuk is referring to neter avoy. Belonging to you means not that you can eat it anywhere, but that's like Ma'aser Sheni. It belongs to the owners with the restrictions. Halacha beis. He can be paid it like he can be paid the Ma'aser Sheni, which also means that if you are using your money to redeem your neter avoy product, you have to add a fifth. Another thing. Now, what is oinus hamaisis? We already learned. It depends for what. There's two. I'm sorry. Neter avoy is only shaykh by Ilanis. By Ilanis, that Rambam Paskins, let's use the words chanata. From when the tree is budding, that is from when it's shaykh to redeem it. Prior to it, it's not considered a payda. And even if you wanted to, and you exchanged it on money, it was ineffective. Guys, I know that normally tfuah refers to things that grow on the ground. Things that grow on the ground are not shaykh to neter avoy. Neter avoy is only shaykh to that which is under the obligation of arla. Arla is only on fruits. You plant once and it grows again and again and again and again. Just like Ma'aser Sheni cannot be nifta b'mechubar. Another din, fareyu mamen gevaya k'ma'aser. And therefore, even though you get to keep it, it's like yours, but it's not yours. If it was gifted prior to it reaching the stage of oinus hamaisos, then it could be given. But if it's already ripe, you cannot gift it. So if a man is going to use his neter avoy, let's say to be mekadosh a woman, like we learned over Shabbos, the kiddushin will not be effective. The dinoi b'shar devarim le'ingen achila p'tiyah, just like meiser. Halacha gimel. Hapoy de kerem revoy. You want to redeem a vineyard. So here, there's a unique din. You can redeem it either when they are grapes, harvested but grapes, or you can redeem it when it's wine. And the same thing is by olives, because both the solid and the liquid state are valid, chashuv, acknowledged states. Prior to you redeeming it, you can't make apple juice and then redeem it. If the whole kerem is in this fourth year, there isn't a din of shikha, there's no din of peya, there's no din of peret, there's no din of alayis. Furthermore, you don't have to be mafresh, not trumas or not meiser is, just like you don't have to be mafresh that from meiser sheni. Ella kuloi oila Yerushalayim, or all of it is going to be nifta v'yalo hadamim v'ye'achlu for food or drink in Yerushalayim, mamish like meiser sheni. Halacha 5. Another shel kerem revoy. Here, interesting halacha. Kiskinu bezdin sheyu oilam Yerushalayim ahalach yoim l'chol sad. Meiser sheni. Do you know that even though the Torah says ki yirchak mimcha hamakim ki lo yisuchal se'esoi, but if I have product of meiser sheni, as long as I did not bring the fruits in Yerushalayim, I can redeem it, even if I'm right outside the wall. You can say, you're not far away. I want to redeem it on money. You can do it. They made a takana. They wanted for the Shuka Yerushalayim to be filled with grapes There was no lack of wine with dafka grapes. So if you live within the mahalach of Yom Echad, there you're not allowed to exchange it. Therefore, you're going to be obliged to go to Yerushalayim with the grape itself. This is during the times of the Beis Hamikdash. However, Beis Hamikdash, and then especially in the beginning, who was there? It was Rome. There's no need to make the markets of the Romans beautiful. However, afilu b'zman hamikdash niftin samoch l'chaimam. Halacha vav keitzad poiden at the boy. Maniach es asal al pi shloisha. You have to exchange it on money. Who's going to estimate how much it's worth? It has to have 3 people. And the oimed kama adam roitzel liftoi sloi b'selam. How much of this basket can you buy with the selam? But hold on. Here's the word. How you would pay if someone is telling you to buy something while it's still in a very early phase of development. You're going to pay less for it because even after buying it, you still have to spend money to be shoymed it. You have to then pay money for people to harvest it. That's the number. Actually, it means that you're going to be getting for a lot of fruit a very little amount of money. That's to the mila of there'll be more money of netar avoy. You have to spend a lot of money. And not only that, how much money would you pay for fruit if not only do you have to guard it and do you have to harvest it, but then you'll have to transport it because without an exchange, this has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. After that number is given, it's going to be a very cheap amount of price, not how much it's worth now, but if you would pay money, and then you would still have to spend all of that. Okay, now you designate the money that is needed to cover this basket, and you say, "Kol hanilkat mizeh is mechul al hamoisa elu mishar kach v'kach selam b'selam."
So it's to the detriment, so to speak, of the hektish.
No, for the opposite. In other words, Danny, the more money I need to spend, you're right. It's to the detriment because you're spending. I take it back. You're spending very little amounts of money. Correct.
In the Meiser Sheni, don't worry about the cost of the bottle.
Correct.
Even the cost of the shipping is
very good. Correct. In other words, there's going to be less money in exchange. You get more for your money because you don't spend that much. For a little bit of money, you get a lot.
You estimate the cost of the basket also?
You don't. The basket b'chlal is not. Basket is separate. Now, on the Shemitah year, you'll have to ironically pay more. Why? Because since during the Shemitah year, not anyone had a shomer on the fields, no one hired workers because you're allowed to eat Peder Shvis, but you can't harvest it commercially. You can go yourself and take what you need then. So no one hired any, there was no additional expense for you getting product. Which is also a product that for which people did not have shomerim. But sometimes people would pay workers to harvest product of hefker. So a little bit more, you would get a little bit of a better rate of exchange. Which is sheyad hakol. That's your revoy. It can happen. We'll see soon how to cheshbon it. Sorech litzaynoi bekoizos adama. Guys, Shemitah, everyone can gather product. We're speaking about a practical thing. If I can go into anyone's field today and then the Holy Land and take stuff, I need to know whether it's a revoy. Because if it's a revoy, I can't take it and eat it. I have to take it to Yerushalayim. So they made a simon. They would take certain mounds of earth that would surround the area of netar revoy for everyone to recognize it. Everyone can take it. The din of netar revoy is not delayed a year. Problem is, again, that who's taking it? Anyone. They need to know it's netar revoy. Now, let's think further. What happens if my field is Arla? Arla is Asar Bahana. So they made another simon. Arla is not delayed a year. Shemitah year is counted towards the Arla. But no one is allowed to eat it. No one can have Anah. So there they were mitzayin oise becharses. They would have a certain type of baked clay that they would smear on the ground around the area of Arla. And why was it not enough for them to use that simon of koizazois adama? Now we're not saying to make the same simon, but he's saying that would not be allowed for Arla. That's not such a good marking. It's easier for the owner to make it, but if you just make a barrier with a mound of earth, it's not that difficult for the mound of earth to fall apart. When you make a marking with charsis, that marker is much more permanent, and we have to make them more permanent of a marking because arla is a big isur. Now, we're not saying that kerem nevoy is God forbid to be minimized. No, it's if the Torah says it's also ba'no, then the efforts that we take have to be even greater. People that are more, sometimes we call them chasidim, here we're calling them tsunuyim. If you're going beyond the letter of the law, what they would do is they would set aside money and they would say, Kol hanilkot, because they were saying that this koizazois adama might fall apart. People might not know it. People might end up going to my field because it's Shemitah, and they're going to take produce and eat it there, not in Yerushalayim. So they already put aside money. They know how much value is here. Whatever is being harvested is going to be the schal on this money. Well, why don't they do it right away? Because they can't do it with mechumer. But that money, then at the end of the year, they're going to take and eat in Yerushalayim. Beautiful. Halachiches. Now, from here until the end of the chapter, this is so important. And I'll tell you why it's important. First, it's a learning Torah. But guys, don't forget that Arla, that Rambam Paskins, is Noyek, Halacha L'Moshe Mesinai, Chutz La'aretz. So how do you count Arla? Here in LA, right? So when it comes to planting seeds together, no problem. I can, there's no zeroim, kile zeroim, I can make a vegetable patch in my backyard without all of the dinim that we learned about. There's no kalayim. I'm thinking about kile zeroim. But Arla is noyek. So what do you do? So let's go. Be'echad betishrei, first of all, is Rosh Hashanah, both la'arla ulrivoy. Don't think you understand. We don't understand anything yet. It's not so posh. First, remember, Rosh Hashanah means echad betishrei. Now, from when do you begin counting la'arla ulrivoy? Rivoy is very easy. Rivoy is after you counted 3, the same way you counted the 3, you'll continue to count the 4th. From when you planted. Now, hold on. Not a year. Now that we said there's Echad B'Tishrei, how much prior to Echad B'Tishrei do you need to plant for you to say it already had a year? Really, we'll see. A month and 14 days, as we'll explain in a moment. First of all, you need to have a month. Only if you have a month prior to Echad B'Tishrei can we say, 30 days passed. But when, what shot a month? Not from when you put it in the ground. It's only from when the roots took hold prior to 30 days. You have to have something that happened, which is a tikloit. How long does the tikloit take? 14 days. The kamis manaklita, that's going to be for all trees for shtei shabbosos. So it comes out.
This calculation has nothing to do with the 7-year cycle.
This calculation, well, it has nothing to do with the 7-year cycle. It just happens to be that the 7-year cycle also Echad B'Tishrei is the same Rosh Hashanah.
Right, I'm saying.
Nothing to do. Very good. But it's not 3 years. What day? Today is Ches Tishrei. I don't care. It's not the next year's Ches Tishrei. We'll see in a moment. Very interesting. Shittas Rambam. If you plant between Rosh Hashanah and Tu B'Shvat, we'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, you can minimize the first year. When, if it was planted, the 44 days. Nimsa Slami. Shaneteya arba arboim yoim kodim Rosh Hashanah. Then we say 1 year is counted. Now don't think, well, now I know how to count. And you're telling me that the Echad B'Tishrei is the new Rosh Hashanah. Not after 3 years, but Echad B'Tishrei, it's really 2 years and a month. It's not out of Arla. You'll only exit Arla Chamish Asa B'Shvat. Ein HaPeiros HaNetiyah Azois Mutarim Ba'Arla B'Nevi Ad Chamish Asa Yoim B'Shvat. Shur Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. How amazing. No, year number 1 passes, not Chamish Asa B'Shvat. Year number 2, not Chamish Asa B'Shvat. But for the 3rd year, to say the 3rd year ended, it's only Chamish Asa B'Shvat Ketzah. Hanuteya Ilan Maichol. He's giving an example, another date about Tu B'Av, or Chamish Asa B'Av. The Chamish Asa B'Av. What's the mile of Chamisha Asa B'Av? That you still have, right? You have the full 44 days. And you planted it, let's say, in the 10th year by Yovel. Here you go, David. People are counting these years. It's also interesting that the 10th year of the Yovel can also be called the 3rd year. But that's the way, there was another count when you count the Yovel. You're not only counting what year are we in the Shemitah cycle, what year are we in the Yovel? 10th year. And Hareyu b'toich shnei arla, until when will this be in its arla year? Until Chamisha Asa B'Shvat Mishnas Shloish Esrei, which is really much less than 3 years. Because since you had the 44 days in year number 1, you had a abbreviated year number 1. The whole Mashi Yoitzi Ha'ilan. Let me touch. Yoitzi means Chanita, budding. B'toich Zmanzeh, if it began to bud prior Harei Arla. Even if that which budded was only really, really ready and ripened after Chamisha Asa B'Av. Doesn't matter. We look at the Chanot. U'michamisha Asa B'Shvat Mishnas Shloish Esrei B'Yovel. Now let's go to Neteravoy. At Chamisha Asa B'Shvat Mishnas Arba Esrei. If you're living in Eretz Yisrael, which is where they have the din of Neteravoy, all of what grows is called Neteravoy. And again, it doesn't end on Echad B'Tishrei. It ends Chamisha Asa B'Shvat.
The shortest it could be, it's still 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years.
Why is it's a little bit less than 2.5 years, right? Because Shvat Adar.
Until Shvat, right?
Yeah. And now either take it to Yerushalayim or Tzarech B'Din. Now, what happens if a year is a leap year? That's why he's saying, David, the way he's wording it, the way you're wording it. No, it's like we count years. If there's another 13th month, then there'll be another month to Arla, another month to Neteravoy. It has to do with the Jewish calendar date. In the Sabra Shana, Sabra Levoy. Now, Halacha Yud Aleph, the Toy B'Shisha Asa B'Av Mishnas Eser, which means we're not counting that day. It's not a full day. It means you don't have a full 44 days until Echad B'Tishrei. So when do you complete the first year? Next year, Echad B'Tishrei. Well, you also like Shnas Eser. Shnas Eser is not even going to be counted. So it's going to be Arla, Shnas Achad Esrei, Shtayim Esrei, and the whole Shloish Esrei. Echad B'Tishrei on the 14th year to Yovel. I know it's Echad B'Tishrei, but it's not Chamisha Asa B'Shvat yet. Vareu Neteravoy, Mei Rosh Hashanah. Oh, 1 second. Vareu Neteravoy, Mei Rosh Hashanah. Shol Shnas Arba Esrei. I'm sorry. So here, remember, guys. See how it's not consistent. Here it changes to Rosh Hashanah. It goes, since you didn't have an abbreviated first year, you did not have an abbreviated first year, so he's saying it's net to the void. You know what it could be, guys? What does Rosh Hashanah mean? You have Rambam, Chamisha Asa B'Shvat. I'll tell you in a moment, Danny. Take a look over there. What does Rosh Hashanah mean? Doesn't say in the bottom of him what it means. Doesn't say over here. Now, guys, now here it becomes very difficult. Now, listen to this. Halacha Yud Beis. Everyone speaks about the Shittas Rambam. Nota Hanetiyah.
But it never mentions Tu B'Shvat as Rosh Hashanah.
I know that. I know. Okay, wait. But look at next halacha. Here it's clear. If you plant a tree, Meirosh Chodesh, I want you to know that in many Rambams it says clearly that Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. In other words, if you planted not prior but less to the 44 days, if you planted Rosh Chodesh until Chamisha Asa B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah Echad B'Tishrei, yes, David, and I'm telling you it's a mistake I think here in the Rambam. That's what it's written Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Moina la shaloi shanim miyoim liyoim. Here you have a yom liyoim count to Arla. Umiyoim liyoim l'revoy. You guys hear this? I want you to know that you look up the Noisei Kalim, they don't know where the Rambam got it from. We don't know anything where the Rambam got anything from, so we're not that troubled. But the Rambam is really making, if we're learning good pshat and halacha Yud Aleph, let's go. We're learning good pshat. Rosh Hashanah means Echad B'Tishrei because the Rambam wrote that Echad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah. That they're really
in the notes.
Yes.
What do you call it? It says the reckoning is made from Rosh Hashanah, not 15th of Shvat.
Correct.
Although there are Rishonim who maintained it in this instance as well, we should recognize 15th of Shvat.
Very good.
Private sites.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what Ira says. That it should be till two.
So here, if we're learning, guys, if we're learning the Pshat in Yudal, the Rambam is giving us 3 different cheshbonos. It's mamish crazy. So if you plan, when you're using an abbreviated begata.
We're going to use two Rishvat on the end.
If you're planting it without abbreviated, so then it's Rosh Hashanah. Let's go to Rosh Hashanah. If you're planting it from Rosh Hashanah until Tu B'Shvat, you go day to day. The way Amaratzam say 3 years. Taka. And that's the void. Now, for the easy. Now, all of this is because you have to learn the Mishnayos and you have to learn Talmud Yerushalmi, and this is the way that Rambam understands the whole sugya. The Rambam is saying that I saw other go'anim, the Rambam is giving them some covet, but then knocking them completely. They make other calculations, and what they hold is not even worthy for me to respond to them. And Vaday told Soifrim, the great Soifrim, and they made mistakes. And Vehoemes, Kvar B'Yanu Darko. So we have 3 ways of making the calculation. Guys, we have to know this. Let's go. We paskin like the Rambam. Now in LA, that's how it works. How do you cheshbon the 3 years? Even though we don't have net to avoid, but it's for Arlo.
No matter which way you spin it, it's going to be around 3 years.
I know that, but it's not exact. You see, it's different cheshbon. Now, guys, let's go to the final halacha. Halacha Yud Gimel. Next pedic is
Arlo is only 4 years.
No, not at all.
No, it
could be 2.5 years.
Arlo also.
No, net to avoid is however you cheshbon for Arlo, that same cheshbon at a year in the Holy Land. Halacha Yud Gimel. Ha'alin leaves. We're speaking about parts of the tree that are not food. Halulavim, and I just spent $60 on a lulav. I never did it in my life. Gavaldik. Danny, you have no idea what's going on over here. Because since it's a Shemitah year last year, they're saying that the Esrogim were really, I don't know, they were Mehudar according to the Baal Shem Tov. You have to be a tzaddik to see the beauty in it. So the prices really went up.
Not the Italian ones.
Not the Italian ones, but they're costing $300, $200 a esek. Used to cost $75. It costed $100, $120. That was last year.
But the lulav more because it comes from it's straw.
No, because they decided. I don't know. Anyway, let's go back. I love it. Umega funim. No, it's the fruit of buds, not wine. Basmother. No. Umega funim is sap. Smother. Fruits of buds. All of them are not included. It's amazing. Guys, trees are not usher to eat. They're considered trees. And also, it means it's also not eating it. They're not usher bahano. They're mutarim ba'arla, and they're not bound by the void. At least it's easy. Whatever is arla is the void. However, but if you have grapes, there were certain types of west winds, and it ruined them, or grape seeds, or grape peels, or temed, or the peels of rimonim, or their flowers, klipe goizim, hagarinim. They, the Rambam says, are in between. They are asur and arla. Now, guys, asur and arla is because people commonly have benefit from them. So since arla is connected not to eating but to hana'ah, so we're not saying is it food. We're saying is it something that people normally have hana'ah from. People normally have hana'ah from this. So therefore it's asur b'hana'ah. But the mutarim b'rivoy. Because if rivoy is only regarding eating, it's not a food. And b'hana'ah all other fruits that were not harvested off the trees, but they fell down, which means they're not of the greatest quality, that's called food already, even though it's inferior food, and therefore they are asur, they are included both in Arla and in Netarivoy. Today's final chapter is also very negei l'maisa. First of all, Perek Yud is more about Netarivoy. Only tomorrow we're finishing this whole series. Here's the big question that everyone asks over here. If you have a tree and you replant it, when do we say that you need to restart the count, l'chumra? And when do you get to say, no, this tree is sapling, but it was already, let's say, 2 years. And then the gardener put it in your backyard. It happens a lot over here. When can I continue to count from the beginning and not a recount? And finally, we're going to learn dinim that if someone planted a pedi of arla, now arla is asur b'hana. We learned, for example, if you plant truma, even the davar shezaroi kala, so Chachamim gave you a knas that everything that grows is considered truma. It's not the ruin, but it's truma. So what's going to happen if you plant an arla pedi? do we say that whole tree is arla forever asr? And we'll see we don't say that. Because what causes a seed to grow isn't only the seed, especially al-pi chasidus. It's really the koyach hatzameach ba'aretz. So it's called zevazeh goyim. We're not minimizing the involvement of the seed, but there are other factors. There's the zachar and the nekeva. Let's word it that way.
Also, when it decomposes,
It decomposes even better. But by truma, we were not machal. Here, by arla, since zevazeh goyim is mutter, we're going to allow post facto for you to have hana nachanes. Now, there's no dinam of arla. You can't have hana for the first 3 years, but we don't say it's forever. Chedapedikunas 21 halachas. Let's try to finish this on time. Halacha alf. Kol shahu chayiv ba'arla. In other words, any tree that's chayiv in arla, kol shahu chayiv ba'arla is not any location. Just to make it clear, guys, arla is noyek in chutz la'aretz. Halacha l'moshe Sinai and netanevai is not at all. Kol shahu chayiv ba'arla means any type that's connected to arla. As we finished in the last chapter, it's food. Yesh lo'irevai. But any product that's patim in the arla. That means it's not even considered something from which you derive benefit. It's not included in a boy. Shenema, because the Torah puts it together in Kedoshim. And then on that, let's go to your kavanah. How kavanah is so powerful. You plant a fruit tree, but you planted it only. You want to plant a barrier, or you planted it because you need wood, because you're building a beam. You did not, the owner did not plant it to the paytas. Guys, it's completely excluded from the parsha of Arla. Now, what happens if you change your mind? You planted it l'siyag, but then you said, why would I do that? For that, I can plant a cheap tree. This tree I'll leave for food. Or the other direction, you planted it l'maychol, and then you changed your mind, and you said, you know what, I'll use it l'siyag. Kiven she'erev boy machshavas chiyuv. Whether it began or later, doesn't matter when you had that machshava, chayav. Now, very important that Adva says, but the 3 years are counted from when you planted it. We don't say that since when I planted it, Bachal would have been excluded. What's machayvit, my kavana? So let's begin counting it from my kavana. That we don't say. That we went in the last chapter. How do you make the cheshbonis? Natoy shalom shalom l'siyag.
The siyag refer to what people do nowadays. They put trees.
Yeah. People put trees in order for there to be a nice fence. It's called a natural fence. If you planted it and it was there for 3 years, and we can't elch l'maychol, so we said that your machshava is machayev. But now, how did we begin today's chapter? That only something that was chayv and arl is chayv and eterivoy. So if you change the intent when it was in the halachic 4th year, you won't be machayev and eterivoy. Why? Because you already exited the times of arla. Shekol she'eloi arla. That's a great application of halacha aleph. Eloi revoy. Halacha gimel. Not ilan v'choshev shiyat sadap tim shaloi l'maychol v'chitzon l'siyag. Even more. You want that the inner part should be l'maychol. Makes so much sense. You don't want to feed the world. You want the outer part of the tree to be l'siyag. Oy tzara tachton, which you can reach without a ladder, should be l'maychol. And you have a next door neighbor that has a 2-story apartment. And you want to block. Oh, you don't need the bottom. You need the top. You can do that. Well, l'siyag. Look how great is this. It works according to your kavanah. The part of the tree that's l'maychol chayva arlo. And the chiddush is v'zeh shechoshav ol l'siyag la'etzim potter. Wow. Mamish. And only in that part. Now, caper bush is something that we learn a lot about in the Masechta Brachos. I think the Gemara says there were 5 products from the caper bush. So he says that v'hatzlof chayev ba'arla, but that only refers to the advi yoinois. It's called the caper berries. But the other parts of the tree are not considered maichol, and they are kafris and are mutarois. You did not plant the trees in order to partake of the food. You actually left the tree ownerless. You planted the tree, that's the pshat, for whoever wants to eat. Doesn't matter. Why? Because it says unetatem in the plural. It doesn't have to be for your food. It has to be for food. There's a chiyuv of arla. That you are chayv in arla Chayiv and Adl, that's only Eretz Yisrael. However, b'chutz la'aretz, even if you are, and like guys, we learned that halacha l'moshe b'sina you chayiv and Adl, but this doesn't apply in chutz la'aretz. Halacha hey, hanetei b'reshus harabim. So now you're not planting in halacha dalud, you planted it in your property, but your intent was for whoever wants. Here you're planting it in the reshus harabim, or you're planting it in a boat, or that which was not planted, it just grew on its own. Or a guy that planted bein l'Yisrael, bein la'atzmai, or if a gazlan planted. In all of these cases, since it's l'maichol chayavin both and arla and nivoi halacha vav ha'olam elav b'makim terashin, but something that grew on its own. But here it's growing in a very rocky terrain. That's already different, which means the quality of the fruit will be very inferior. Here we say pater. It's not you planted it, nor will it be good. There's two negatives. Another than you will also be pater for who shaloy yehei oisa kedei tipul. But that's only if the tree doesn't produce fruits that are worthwhile to take in. Because if I plant something out there, and let's say transportation costs $100, but if the product of this tree is so valuable that it's worth $200, or however much money that it's worth it for people to transport it, then it doesn't have the incentive. Because if the tree produces so much fruit or fruit of such value that it's kedai for you to be metapel in it, then you're chayav ba'arla, even though it is b'makayim she'ena yishuv. For example, you plant a tree of esrogim only to use it for the mitzvah, or if you plant olive only to use it for a menorah, you are also still going to be chayiv. Now, higdish v'achar kach nata, potem in arla. But if first you were nata and then you were magdish, yes, chayiv in arla. Halacha ches. So I know that normally we always learn regarding tvua, regarding kitniyos. There we say that if the otzutz, it's not perforated, it's not deriving nourishment from the ground, the Rambam clearly holds that trees, they are so powerful in how they absorb or suck up nourishment, even if it is ba'atzutz she'eino nakav, chayev ba'arla. Afa pi she'eino ka'aretz, for all of the dinim concerning zerayim. But Ilanois, Ayonkim min haaretz, even though, guys, are speaking about a earthenware pot, that's important. And again, it's within 10 tefachim from the ground. I remember that number. But here we say that even though it's not perforated, if you plant a tree in your house, however, so the goyim planted it even prior to us going in there. Those trees are patur, and many commentators are of the opinion. Now, this is already a much bigger topic. But let's go with the approach that Mashiach is coming. That's for the Kol Alma. But there's going to be a massive kibbutz golius after Mashiach will come, and then there's going to be what we will call halachically a bias kulchan. So the same halacha will apply. That all of the trees that are, all of the trees that are planted by goyim now, prior to the major kibbutz golios, are exempt from arlam and atayram. Aval mishabal at the moment there was a biaskulchem, af mashenat goyim. After that fact, chayav shenem kisavay la'aretz unatatem lishas bia halachiyut. The goy shehirkid ilan l'maychel al gabi ilan srak. He's saying that because we may not graft. But if the grafting was done, the chiddush is, even though it was done on an ilan sadak, chayev ba'arlam. No, a Jew can benefit. We also learned this, if you remember, this irony, that you're not allowed to do these cross plantings or grafting, right? Kile ilanis only means grafting. But even though it's usher to do, lachatchila, I can have benefit, but I have to wait till 3 years. The yesh l'nachli neteravoy. The Rambam's Bechlal sheet is going can keep mitzvahs with the exclusion, according to the Rambam, of keeping Shabbos and learning Torah. But if a guy wants to keep neteravoy, yeah, she'im bal lini when mikzazu hareu kodesh keneteravoy shel Yisrael. It's mamash imbued with kadosh. Halacha yudalef. Echad hanoiteya garina whether you're planting a seed, whether you're planting a yichur means a anaf. You have to know how to plant. Mino ilan. Or if you uprooted an entire ilan from one place and you planted it in another place. So let's begin with the premise and then we'll learn the exceptions. Chayiv ba'arla, from when you currently planted it. Now, by a seed, everyone understands that. The Rambam is going menakala lakavit. When you're planting a yichur, guys, a yichur means an anaf. The anaf already grew. No, doesn't matter. You're planting this anaf, this yichur, as a new tree. It's from when you planted it. With all of the cheshbonos we learned in the last chapter. Even more, even if you have a full-fledged tree, you replanted the tree. All right, guys. Again, there's going to be the exceptions to that. You begin a new count. Now, what happens if ziza or if you shook the tree from its place, but you did not uproot it, and then you refill that shook in place with new earth? So here will be the key. If the tree would have survived even without you refilling it with earth, that type of zazua is not considered uprooting, and therefore you don't have to recount. But the imlav, even though you saved the tree because now you refilled it with earth, but had you not done it, it would have died. Guys, there's more details. There's a lot of more dinner. You uprooted it. Even only one root stayed in the ground. Even if it's only kamachad. You know how little. That little, when people, the needles that you use to make embroidery, they were the thinnest of needles. If you left it, in other words, if you left that shaydish in the ground and you replanted it, potter, same logic. Guys, listen to the power of this. If you have a tree as big as oig, if the skinniest shaydish stayed in the ground, there's always the possibility that tree would have survived. How great is that for Yidden? If Yidden uproot themselves, God forbid, but they leave one mitzvah, epis, they're good. They're good. That means it's easy for them to regenerate themselves. If nekar kuloi, but the nekra hasela sheshiroshat ba imoi. The word sela doesn't mean a rock. Sela means so much earth, such a clod of earth was taken together with the tree, and v'chazev in a toy kumayshuhu, meaning with all of the earth that you took with it. So this is what we say now. If the tree could have continued to live with that earth, even if it would not have been replanted in another location, let's say you would now put this in a big pot. If you took out so much earth that earth could give nourishment to the tree, then do we say harehu kimishalei nekar? But if you did not take out that amount of earth, and if you will not replant it, this tree will not live off the earth that you took, you'll be chayiv. Halacha Yud Gimel. By the way, today, when you have a gardener doing it, I'm not going into the namandos of a goy, but that will be the question to ask. This is the key issue. When you took out normally they take out saplings. If the earth that you took it out in, which is normally what happens, they put it in a vase. If the tree would continue to live in the vase, not lo'olam vod, but if it can continue to live there, that's called it was not uprooted because you took it out with earth. You didn't take the tree out; you took the earth out. If a tree was cut down, in other words, you cut down the trunk, and now it grew again. That's called a new tree. From when you finish cutting it. Halacha Yudalot. Echad hanoiteya. Now we're going to learn different ways of planting. What we call normally planting. Mavrich is when you take a branch and you bend it down and you stick it into the ground. Markiv is when you graft one branch of one tree into another tree. All of that, again, other than the exceptional cases, that's called a new act of planting. You're chayiv. When do we say that it's considered a new act of planting? If that branch that you bent over was cut off its source. Or, obviously, when you're grafting a branch from tree Aleph and tree Beis, you cut it off tree Aleph. So now the act of grafting is called a replanting. But what happens many times, they would take a branch, they would bend it down and stick it into the ground, but they would not cut it off its source. Hazakein and bevricha ba'aretz without snipping it off. So now it's really connected on both sides. So then in both cases, you're not chayiv. It's not called an act of new planting. In other words, as long as you are still connected to the old, even though you're beginning something new, which is really beruchni, is how we view every generation. Every generation has its own unique avodah. But the beauty of us, of Truma Yidin, is that we stay connected and loyal to that of the past. We don't say, we're blazing a new trail. Yeah, you're blazing a new trail, but stay connected to the past. Then you're not, it's not a new plantation. Halacha Tezvav. Godal ze hayeled shehivrich v'asa peiros. So you left it connected to the past and already reached the point where it's producing peiros. And at some point later, you're mafsik it. We don't say, since it's already growing fruit for a long time, I can disconnect it. You may never disconnect it. And if you now disconnect it, you now you planted it. The hers, and now you begin counting the cheshbon of Arla. And in Eretz Yisrael, not to the void. However, the fruits that are currently on this branch, those fruits remain mutter because they grew when it was still connected. No matter how much we advance further, we always stay connected to the past. That's the pshat. But if you left it on the tree after you cut it off, which is considered the new act of planting, and now this fruit added more than 200ths, and this 200ths is what is called arla, and arla is only bottle in a ratio of 200 to 1. So the moment the new growth is asad. It's coming from mutter. If it's less than 200, it's bottle. More, it's us. But in the other way around. Yaldam, if you have a young tree and you grafted it into an old tree, now we're going in the opposite direction. So now, will we say that since it's grafted in the old tree already is beyond the years of Arla. So the new product is not Arla. Indeed. But here in the other way around, here, if there were fruits prior to the grafting, those fruits are Arla. Even though this fruit now is continuing to grow from the old tree, which is not Arla, when something good comes from something bad, it always remains bad. Oh, your payers by Yalda. Here, I feel I see from Masayim. So why didn't you say bittel? Why didn't you say the new growth, which is mutter, should be mevatel? It's more than 200 against what was there before. It always remains asur. Harei ela peiros shel yad asurim she'ein gedulei heten malin esho ikar ha'asur. Nice. Halacha Yud Zayin.
You start off bad, you remain bad.
That's right. Amazing. Halacha Yud Zayin. Let's opposite. We all need to start off good. That's the word. We all start off good, which is why no matter how much bad we had, ultimately there's hope. Halacha Yud Zayin. Ilan shehivrich mimenu bad ba'aretz. So you extended a branch into the ground, and like we mentioned, and then you were nekar ilan kulay. Like we just mentioned, nasa oisa ilan kilu atanita and chay ba'arla. From when you uprooted it from the old, you extend the branch down, and now it's growing. And listen to what's happening. You're making a whole train. And now from this new tree, so you have a whole chain. As long as the original one is still connected, all of it is, that's mamish us, that's the Jewish people. There is, oh, God forbid. In other words, there is newness. Everyone is new. Don't worry. You have your own individuality. You did something. You blazed the trail. Nice, but we're still connected. It affects everything further. So here again, we mentioned you have a tree. You cut the tree down. How much do we say that if you cut it mamish down to the ground, even though it regrows, it's a new tree? So the word geza means a stump. A stump, that's the way it works. It's still considered a tree. And anything that grows out of this stump is patim in arba because it's not considered a new growth. But if you cut it so deep into the ground that what remains is not seeing the sun, that means that's the way you define the shoydish. Now it's a new tree. Chayva arlo. Yalda pachos mitefach. If you have a midget tree, it's not even a tefach tall. Even though it's planted for many, many years, Midrabanan, people think it was just within the first 3 years. Marasayim, because it looks like an Itiyah Bashanos. That these midget trees are always rabbinically subject to Arlo, always. When there's only one plant, or even if you have what we call a minor kedem, it's very small. What's the smallest size kedem we learned? 2 against 2 and the tail in the back. We learned this in Ochas Kalayim. But once you have a vineyard entirely that has these small plants, since it's such an anomaly that everyone will hear about it, so there's no marasayim. Hadei yesh la koil. Now, don't think that that's a brand new kedem. It's here forever. It's just that they're very little, midget. If you take a branch of an olive tree, you're allowed to plant it. And we don't say that since you are beginning with an arla, everything that will grow is arla. You don't say, you can do that. But you cannot plant an egoisher arla, because the egos is a pri. Upeiris arla suramana, like we learn on. Now, what happens if you did plant a pedi of arla? That's the final halach of this pedic of today. Even though you did something wrong, again, not like by truma where we say midrabanan. Everything that grows out of truma has a din of truma. No, kishara ilanis doesn't mean that you can eat it right away. No, like any other tree. First 3 years arla, ba'aretz neteravoy. And then it's going to, why? The Rambam will explain in the final halacha of Alav. And we said the words in the intro. It's called Zevez Agoyim is Mutter. The Chayin also, Emar Kifin Kafni Yisher Olam B'Tkolam. Don't graft a underdeveloped cluster of dates, which is Asur Bahana, right, inside the column. And that's going to make it develop. But, Avar Vihirkiv, now Mutter. And that's the rule. Shekol Davar Sheyesh Lei Shnei Garmim. Whenever an entity is coming from 2 causes, even though one of them is asr, but if the other one is mutter, then we say post facto, hadei hanigra mishneim is mutter. And lefikach hatzemeach mipelos arla is mutter. Shahadei garam latzi muach taka de pri. Of course, the pri is part of, which is asr, but a pri doesn't grow out of a seed. It also needs the earth. The earth is not arla. The haaretz hamuter.